British officers who had made several escape attempts from POW camps were sent here. Theodor Eicke occupied this large villa. The simple buildings alongside housed high-ranking SS officers. The SS guards were housed at the southern edge of the camp. This building was the hospital and hygiene centre for the SS. Opposite the main entrance gate, alongside the drive, is the SS mess. The guard units were fed here. Work brings freedom. This slogan was maliciously emblazoned above many of the entrance gates to the concentration camps. Work brought death to many of the inmates who were tormented, abused, underfed and overworked in the notorious SS workshops and industrial sites. 3 kilometers from Sachsenhausen was the Klinkerwerks. From August 1938 to 1941, 1,800 prisoners used for building the docks and barracks here marched daily to and from Sachsenhausen camp. Many prisoners were worked to death building the docks, mostly Jews, gypsies, Jehovah's Witnesses and homosexuals. From 1941 onwards, slave workers were housed in their own barracks at the works. From 1942, Sachsenhausen camp supplied slave labour to 100 sub-camps sited in or beside armament factories, most of which were in Berlin. In the Klinkerwerks, labourers worked more than 10 hours a day with an inadequate diet and working at the double under the scrutiny of the sadistic SS guards. Only the foundations of the factory complex remind us of what once took place here. First, tiles were manufactured, and later, up until war's end, stick grenades. The uniform, numbers, stripes and shaven heads were intended to rob them of any individuality. By the end of 1944, German forces were retreating rapidly, and the Russian army were getting nearer to the concentration camps. Trainloads of prisoners were now being diverted to camps in Germany instead of those camps in the east. This included Auschwitz and Majdanek, where they were also slowly transporting prisoners to other camps nearer Germany. Thousands of prisoners were crammed into railway cattle trucks. Many died from hunger, thirst and sheer exhaustion on these hellish journeys. The roar of the distant guns brought the prisoners hope for freedom, but the situation became worse, with the inhuman transport conditions to the west and the nervous SS guards being more liberal with beatings and murders. In the early months of 1945, it was becoming apparent that the war would soon be over. The SS chief Heinrich Himmler gave the order that, on the first sign of the enemy approaching, all concentration camps will march their prisoners west and destroy all incriminating evidence in the camps. On the 20th of April, the evacuation of Sachsenhausen began. Columns of 500 prisoners at a time leaving the camp, all taking different routes. The plan of the SS was to march the prisoners to the Baltic coast, then ship them out to sea and drown them. Because of the size of the Sachsenhausen inmate population, this plan was seen by the SS as the most effective way of killing so many people quickly. They intended to destroy all the evidence that betrayed the horror which took place in the concentration camp. Weakened by incarceration and clothed in just rags, many of the prisoners on the death march broke down under the strain. They were shot immediately. The bedraggled columns reached the forest at Wilktoten, just north of Berlin. Here the prisoners were rested for 4 days and given a few potatoes and porridge to eat. They built makeshift camps and lit fires to keep themselves warm through the bitter cold nights and collected roots to supplement their meagre diet. The death march continued on its way to the Baltic coast. Fortunately, the columns were intercepted by the Swedish Red Cross, who distributed food amongst the starving prisoners, thus saving many lives. but more importantly, they were able to stop the SS guards shooting the exhausted prisoners. Finally, on May the 3rd, after marching for almost 2 weeks, the column was approached by the Russian army and the SS guards fled. The prisoners never reached the Baltic coast. The 3,000 frail and sick prisoners that were left behind in Sachsenhausen were eventually liberated by the Russians on the 22nd of April. Many were so diseased, malnourished and exhausted, they died during their first weeks of freedom. Survivors of Sachsenhausen were transported out, some to resettlement camps and others to their homelands. The war was over. In May 1945, the German army surrendered. The war had cost over 50 million lives. Hitler, Himmler and Goebbels had already committed suicide. 24 other key Nazi figures were tried at Nuremberg in front of an international tribunal. English judge Sir Geoffrey Lauren passed judgment on the defendants. All were found guilty and convicted. Between the 23rd of October and the 1st of November 1947, in the town hall in Berlin-Pankow, a trial took place before a Soviet military tribunal. The accused were 13 SS guards from Sachsenhausen concentration camp, including 2 block guards plus the commandant. These prisoners had been arrested by the Soviets in 1945 and imprisoned awaiting trial. These are the accused. Anto Keindal, commandant of Sachsenhausen concentration camp. Baum Kotter, the camp doctor who performed experiments on prisoners. Lieutenant Sorg and Nittler, 2 of the sadistic block guards. Paul Sokovsky, the executioner, was a former prisoner of the camp. In 1939 he was interned by the Nazis as a political prisoner, but the pressure of solitary confinement and regular beatings made him, in 1942, accept the post as the camp hangman and executioner. After execution, the bodies were taken to the crematorium ovens. These were in constant use. The charred bones were ground down to ash. All the defendants were convicted to an average sentence of 25 years and all perished in a Siberian prison, the last one in 1955. The abandoned camp bears witness to the suffering, the degradation and the horror of what was administered here under Hitler's fascist regime. On the 23rd of April 1961, the East German government erected a national memorial on the site of the former Sachsenhausen concentration camp. In 1995, surviving inmates and families of lost loved ones congregated at the memorial for the 50th anniversary of Sachsenhausen's liberation. Some ex-prisoners donned the uniforms and the distinguishing badges they were wearing on their release. The memorial gave the survivors of Sachsenhausen concentration camp the opportunity to commemorate those who were murdered, to come to terms with their personal memories, and to pass on their experiences to following generations.